Prince Harry no longer has his own brother's phone number. Let that sink in for a moment. He isn't blocked, screened, or sent to voicemail. He simply doesn't have it. Two brothers who once walked side by side behind their mother's coffin, who grieved together in front of the watching world, are now so completely estranged that one of them could not reach the other even if his life depended on it. And here's the part of the story that should make you sit up and pay attention, the part you need to stay for because it may change the way you see this entire royal feud. The one person on this planet who is said to be capable of fixing this, the only person Prince William truly listens to, is now being quietly, but unmistakably, pressured to clean up a mess she did absolutely nothing to create. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how that pressure is being applied, why it reveals just how desperate Prince Harry has become, and why this entire campaign is almost certainly doomed to fail before it has properly begun. But first, you need to understand where this story is coming from, because one detail changes how much weight you should give to every word of it. Let me be completely upfront about how I see this, because I always will be with you. Prince Harry has some nerve. He is now, in effect, piling pressure onto Catherine, Princess of Wales, to step in and somehow rescue his failing relationship with Prince William. And he does not seem capable of grasping the most basic truth of the situation. It's over. It's gone. Finished. Catherine tried for years to keep a door open for him. She was the peacemaker. She was the bridge. She was the one person in that family who continued to extend grace long after everyone else had run out of it. And what did he do with that grace? He threw it right back in her face, with attack after attack, not just against William, not just against Camilla, but against Catherine herself. So yes, I believe this latest effort is going to fail. But it still tells us something significant, because desperation, as you're about to see, makes people do very revealing things. Prince Harry doesn't even have William's phone number anymore. Just stop and think about your own life for a moment. Think about your brother, your sister, or the sibling you grew up with, the one you shared memories with, argued with, and spent years alongside. Now imagine reaching the point where you couldn't contact them at all. Not wouldn't, couldn't. No number, no channel, nothing. That is where the A and the spare have ended up. It is, of course, a humiliating revelation for Harry. But the report twists the knife even further, claiming that even if Harry did have the number, Prince William wouldn't answer. The phone could ring across the Atlantic until the battery died, and the future king would simply let it ring. Hold that image in your mind, because we'll come back to it at the end of this video, and by then, it may mean something very different. To understand how we reached a point where two brothers can't even call each other, you need the timeline. The speed of this collapse is remarkable. Wind the clock back 6 years. In January 2020, Harry and Meghan stunned the world by announcing they were stepping back as senior working royals. The late Queen summoned the family to her Norfolk estate for crisis talks, and an agreement was reached. It came with clear rules, clear limits, and clear consequences. A half-in, half-out arrangement was never on the table. Within 14 months came the Oprah interview, watched by tens of millions around the world, featuring explosive allegations and claims directed at unnamed members of the royal family. Then came the streaming documentary, hours of grievances presented to a global audience. Then, in January 2023, came the memoir Spare, perhaps the most intimate betrayal of all. Family conversations, private moments, and deeply personal details were laid bare for the world to see. 4 major blows in just 3 years. Each one made the next family Christmas more difficult than the last. And throughout it all, the royal family said very little publicly, absorbing criticism after criticism in silence. The contrast became impossible to ignore. One side kept talking. The other side quietly changed the locks. That is the road that leads to a missing phone number. And that timeline is important because everything you're about to hear sits on top of it. In those pages, Harry accused William of physically attacking him during a 2019 argument that was reportedly about Meghan. He mocked William's hair loss. He even characterized their public appearances together, including standing beside him as best man at William's wedding, as nothing more than a public relations exercise. Think about that for a moment. The best man speech. The shared smiles outside Westminster Abbey. the images that many people viewed as genuine expressions of brotherly affection. All of it was dismissed in print as little more than theatre. Every one of those passages was another bridge set on fire. But here's the part most people get wrong about that book. Many assume the deepest wound came from what Harry wrote about William. According to this reporting, that may not be the case. Instead, it is what Harry wrote about Catherine that appears to have caused the most lasting damage. A palace source is completely unambiguous about it. William was furious about the book as a whole, but he was especially upset by what Harry said about his wife. He is fiercely protective of Catherine, and according to this source, he may never fully get over it. As a result, he may never be able to rebuild a proper relationship with his brother. Read that again. Not anger that lasts a season. Not resentment that fades after a news cycle. A wound that those closest to him believe may never heal. Which brings us to the twist at the center of this entire story, and perhaps the cruelest irony of all. Catherine is now the most complicated figure in this equation. At the same time, she represents both the source of William's deepest grievance and, according to those who know him best, the only person capable of helping him move beyond it. One entertainment outlet was told that the only person who can consistently get through to William is Catherine. Always. Not his father, the king. Not his advisors. Not even the weight of the institution itself. Catherine. But then comes the line that stopped me in my tracks when I first read it. According to the source, it is unclear whether she even wants to. As a mother, she believes the two brothers should have a relationship. However, her personal feelings toward Harry are understandably conflicted. And honestly, wouldn't yours be it? If someone publicly criticized you in a best-selling book, dragged your name through years of headlines, and then came knocking through intermediaries asking you to fix everything, how warm would your response be? At this point, the report references a royal author whose new book makes a striking claim. And, as always, I'll be honest with you. This is not an author I personally consider especially credible. However, because his claim is being widely repeated, it deserves to be addressed. He argues that Catherine was the very last senior royal to hold out hope for reconciliation. The very last. After the king had hardened his position. After William had drawn his line. She was still standing there with a candle in the window. And according to this author, what finally extinguished that candle were Harry's public comments regarding King Charles's cancer diagnosis. He claims that was her final straw. The picture that emerges, and perhaps the most compelling observation in the entire report, is that the family's most emotionally generous member eventually ran out of patience. While the most decisive member had already drawn his boundaries long ago, the kindest heart gave up last. Even Harry himself, according to the report, now understands that his relationship with William may never be fully repaired. He knows it. He has been told. And yet, as we will see, he continues trying to place the burden on someone else. There is one more fascinating detail buried in this report. A source close to Harry claims that at least one lesson has been learned in Montecito. According to the source, there are currently no plans for projects that involve publicly criticizing or exposing members of the royal family again. The Sussexes would reportedly consider making another documentary about their current life because that format has previously proven commercially successful. However, Harry is said to have no intention of revisiting his relationship with William or King Charles on camera. Now you tell me, is that genuine personal growth? Is it a sign of maturity? Or is it simply the realization that there are no more family secrets left to sell? There is a significant difference between repentance and an empty shop window. You can decide for yourself. I suspect many of you already know where you stand. And so we arrive at the central problem, the immovable object at the heart of this story. William. Because William's position appears to be clear, and everything in this reporting reinforces it. As he has grown older and more confident, the Prince of Wales has become increasingly independent. He marches to the beat of his own drum. One British source describes it this way. William has a singular perspective, and it is extremely difficult to persuade him to do something he does not want to do. And here is the bottom line. He does not want reconciliation. He cannot move past what he views as a betrayal. Full stop. The only possible exception, according to sources, has always been Catherine. Whether she ever chooses to use that influence is a question only she can answer. Keep that thought in mind, because the answer, or perhaps the absence of one, is where this entire story is heading. Now, hanging over all of this family drama is something far more serious. The king's health. King Charles appears to be responding positively to treatment. The 77-year-old announced late last year that his treatment schedule could be reduced in 2026, citing early diagnosis and effective medical intervention. The palace was careful to clarify that his cancer is not in full remission. However, officials stated that his condition has entered what they describe as a precautionary phase. That is genuinely encouraging news, and I know many people will be relieved to hear it. But it does not eliminate the urgency. A man facing a serious illness, whose treatment continues and whose future remains uncertain, has every reason to want his family in order while time still allows. Before the window closes, sit with that phrase for a moment, because it is the quiet drumbeat beneath everything else. Yet, in my view, the king's health may also be the strongest argument against reconciliation. Let me explain. This is the part that almost nobody says out loud. We all know people who have battled cancer. Some of us know people who are no longer here because of it. And we all know what doctors consistently tell patients. One of the greatest enemies during treatment is stress. So ask yourself, why would this family willingly invite more stress into their lives? And not just any stress. Stress from people they no longer trust. Stress from individuals whom they believe have repeatedly violated confidence. There is a detail that often gets lost amid the noise, but it changes the entire conversation. William reportedly believes stress contributed to Catherine's illness. He believes it. So when commentators casually suggest that Catherine should simply pick up the phone and smooth everything over, they are effectively asking a husband to expose his wife once again to the very circumstances he believes harmed her in the first place. And why would Catherine willingly choose that? Why would she want to spend another minute dealing with the same tensions, especially when she has already endured so much? Consider everything she has faced over the past few years. A best-selling memoir questioning her marriage and character. Accusations she could never publicly answer. A cancer diagnosis faced largely in private and with remarkable dignity. And throughout it all, relentless speculation and conspiracy theories swirling online. Yet despite everything, she gave no interviews, authorized no leaks, settled no scores. She simply continued showing up. Continued smiling, continued working, continued raising her children. That is what dignity under pressure looks like. And now, after everything she has endured, some people expect her to clean up the very mess she was caught in. Which brings us to where this story shifts from sad to truly significant. Because all of this is unfolding within something much larger. A genuine conflict at the highest levels of the royal family. A conflict between the king and his heir. And over the past week, that conflict has emerged into public view in a way that is difficult to ignore. A royal correspondent who was reportedly removed from the official royal press pack for daring to report on this very subject, revealed this week that Prince William believes his father is repeating the same mistakes with Harry that he previously made with Andrew. According to the report, William also believes it is impossible to forgive Meghan Markle's accusations of racism directed toward both the King and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Now stop and think about that for a moment. The mainstream media has largely avoided this story. Why? Because many fear suffering the same fate as the journalist who reported it. Access revoked, credentials withdrawn, and doors closed. Think about what that means. The biggest story inside the most famous family on earth, and the accredited press corps is allegedly too afraid to report it. That is precisely why independent commentary channels exist. And it is why what I am about to tell you matters. According to this reporting, William believes Charles is repeating the same mistake with Harry that he made with Andrew. More importantly, William reportedly views Harry's actions, particularly the allegation that Catherine raised inappropriate questions regarding a child's skin color, as unforgivable. Not difficult to forgive. Not something that requires time. Unforgivable. And there is more. William reportedly believes that attempts to rehabilitate Andrew's public image were a mistake from the beginning and that subsequent events have only confirmed that belief. From damaging revelations in biographies to the continued fallout from the Epstein scandal, His position is said to be remarkably simple. Once you are out, you are out. No revolving door. No second chance. No exceptions. That is the real dynamic now sitting at the heart of the monarchy. A king who keeps leaving the door slightly open. An A who wants it permanently closed. And understand what is truly at stake in that disagreement. This is not merely about hurt feelings. It is a debate about the future and survival of the monarchy itself. The king is, by nature, a healer and a father. A man who has already lost years with one son and may feel increasingly aware of the passage of time. William, by contrast, is an institutionalist. He watched the Andrew controversy drag the royal family through years of damaging headlines and concluded that sentiment is often how problems return. One believes that a family incapable of forgiveness is broken. The other believes that a monarchy which forgives the wrong people risks undermining itself. In their own way, both perspectives contain truth. And that is what makes this conflict so compelling and so dangerous, because only one vision can ultimately prevail. And the person who wears the crown the longest eventually shapes the rules. This weekend, we may get a public glimpse of where power currently resides. A royal wedding is approaching, and at royal weddings, nothing happens by accident. Every glance, every seating arrangement, every handshake, every interaction, all of it sends a message. It tells us who holds influence and who does not. So pay close attention, because we will be analyzing every detail. But if I were keeping score today, before a single piece of confetti falls, I would say William is winning this feud. And that brings us to the question that undermines the entire premise of this week's reporting. If this conflict is still ongoing, and I believe it is, why would William suddenly embrace some grand reconciliation with Harry? He is reportedly still urging his own father not to reconcile. That is not the behavior of someone softening. It is the behavior of someone becoming more resolute. In fact, experienced royal observers reported this week that the chances of Harry meeting King Charles this summer appear increasingly slim. The door is not opening. It seems to be closing further with every passing month. And honestly, can you blame them? Ever since the Sussexes departed under the Sandringham Agreement and later pursued commercial projects tied to their royal connections, trust appears to have steadily eroded. Each new controversy, each new headline, and each new public dispute seems to push any future reunion further out of reach. Personally, I do not believe Harry will be invited to some of the major public royal events currently being discussed. Could that change? Of course, there is still time. But the overall direction appears clear. And here is the uncomfortable reality at the center of all of this. No amount of back-channel diplomacy can repair a relationship if trust no longer exists. Let me explain with a simple thought experiment. Imagine sharing a room with someone you do not particularly like. You remain polite. You smile. You exchange small talk. You make the best of the situation. But the other person feels slighted because you are not as warm or enthusiastic as they would prefer. With most people, that results in a little awkwardness and everyone moves on. But what happens when every perceived slight risks becoming public? What happens when ordinary discomfort is interpreted as something far more serious? When every interaction carries the possibility of future accusations or public fallout? Suddenly, every conversation becomes risky. Every gathering becomes stressful. Every misunderstanding becomes potentially explosive. That is why many observers believe William is focused on the future rather than revisiting the past. Before Harry left, the consequences were reportedly made clear. These are the choices. These are the outcomes. These are the risks. And Harry made his decision. He believed he could create a different life on his own terms. Perhaps he believed he could maintain all the benefits of royal life while operating independently. Whether that was realistic is another question entirely. And perhaps, in one narrow sense, he was right. The titles may remain. The formal status may remain. But titles lose much of their significance if the people connected to them no longer engage. No dramatic announcement is required. No official decree. Simply distance. Exile without paperwork. Now, speaking of life in Montecito, let's look at what has happened this week. If a screenwriter had pitched it as fiction, people might have called it too obverse. The image presented was striking. Harry appearing alone in public while Meghan was nowhere to be seen beside him. Dramatic? Perhaps. But consider the actual events. First came a polo match. The photographs attracted attention because Harry appeared unusually isolated. Observers noted him standing alone, looking thoughtful, even detached. And it raises an interesting question. Who does he actually spend time with now? Many of the people surrounding him appear to be employees, security personnel, or professional associates. Contrast that with the life he left behind. In Britain, he had lifelong friends, military companions, family nearby, an extensive support network built over decades. He woke each morning with a clearly defined role and purpose. The California polo field represents a very different reality. The sunshine may be the same. The cameras may still be there. The wealth may still be there. But something else appears absent. Connection. Then came Monday evening. And this is the event that fueled speculation. A glamorous book launch hosted by a world-famous celebrity chef. The significance? The chef has well-known connections to Meghan. He appeared on projects associated with her. She has supported charitable initiatives linked to his work. This was, by any reasonable measure, her social circle. So who attended? Harry. Alone. Meghan was nowhere to be seen. Of course, there may be perfectly ordinary explanations. Someone had to stay home. Schedules may have conflicted. Family responsibilities exist. But it nevertheless prompted discussion. And it highlights a larger question. How much do Harry and Meghan actually have in common professionally anymore? Consider it. Harry appears most comfortable with charitable causes, veterans organizations, and sporting events. Meghan appears focused on business ventures, branding opportunities, media projects, and social networking. Their paths increasingly seem to be diverging. The couple has even publicly acknowledged that they are pursuing separate professional directions. He focuses on philanthropy. She focuses on business, at least in broad terms. Perhaps that is a smart strategy. Perhaps it is simply evolution. Time will tell. But the image is striking. Two people, one mansion, two increasingly separate careers. And perhaps the saddest part is that this is the life Harry fought so hard to create. The life he chose. The future he pursued with his eyes wide open. And there were so many off-ramps along the way. So many moments when a different decision could have changed everything. At almost any point, Harry could have found his way back into the royal fold, had he not publicly criticized his family and, in the eyes of many critics, become the very thing he claimed to oppose, someone using private family matters for public consumption. He was told calmly and clearly, there are certain red lines, and if you cross them, it's over. And by most accounts, he crossed them, again and again. Yet the requests continue. The pressure continues. The briefings continue. Perhaps Catherine can get through to my brother. Perhaps Catherine can fix this. To which many would respond, leave Catherine alone. Leave her completely out of it. This is a woman who stood by him through years of challenges and difficulties. She supported him when few others could. And in return, many believe she became collateral damage in a conflict she never created. Even in his memoir, Harry revisited the infamous Nazi uniform controversy and suggested others shared responsibility for the decision. Whether fair or unfair, that remains a deeply controversial claim. And now the same people are reportedly suggesting that Catherine should somehow step in and repair the relationship. But before we close, there is one more story worth discussing today, one that pulls the king himself into extraordinarily sensitive diplomatic territory. And it appeared on the front page of a major British newspaper. Pay attention to this next part because it is genuinely remarkable. According to recent reporting, King Charles initially had reservations about hosting Donald Trump during a proposed state visit to the United Kingdom. Let me walk you through the details. The reports claim that the king expressed concerns following the highly publicized Oval Office confrontation involving President Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to the newspaper, those concerns reportedly left officials worried that any perceived royal snub of the American president could escalate into a serious diplomatic issue between London and Washington. Several sources claim that Charles was hesitant about the visit at that particular moment because of the controversy surrounding the Zelensky meeting. One source described him as nervous. Another put it more bluntly. The king didn't want to do it. Reports suggest that emails and messages exchanged between British diplomats and senior officials reveal efforts to address those concerns behind the scenes. Officials reportedly spent days managing the situation and ensuring that diplomatic relations remained on track. The concerns are said to appear within heavily redacted government documents that have since become public. And that, in itself, creates another controversy. Because conversations between a monarch and a prime minister are traditionally considered among the most confidential discussions in British public life, sacred territory, far removed from public scrutiny. Yet here we are discussing reports about the king's private reservations regarding one of the most powerful political figures in the world. And the timing could hardly be more sensitive. What makes the story particularly fascinating is the historical context. A state visit is not simply a dinner invitation. It is one of the most significant diplomatic tools Britain possesses. The ceremonial carriage, the state banquet, the military honors, the royal hospitality, the worldwide media attention. Few countries can stage anything comparable. That is precisely why hesitation over such a visit matters. There is no halfway position. Either the monarch hosts the guest publicly and enthusiastically, or questions immediately arise about why he did not. Officials understood that. Diplomats understood that. And that is why every effort was made to ensure private concerns did not become a public diplomatic crisis. So how damaging is this revelation? Honestly, perhaps less damaging than many people assume. Of course, Charles may have had concerns. Many people did. The scenes involving Zelensky generated headlines around the world. And Donald Trump has always been a uniquely unpredictable political figure. Any leader in Charles's position would likely have approached the situation carefully. But what happened afterward is equally important. The visit proceeded. The king fulfilled his role professionally. And by most accounts, a functional working relationship emerged. In fact, there has been little evidence since then of significant tension between the two sides. No major leaks. No public complaints. No visible signs of hostility. That suggests a degree of mutual respect developed despite their differences. And let's be honest about those differences. King Charles and Donald Trump approach many issues from very different perspectives. Climate policy, cultural issues, environmental priorities. They are rarely on the same page. Yet Charles also understands something fundamental. The relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States remains enormously important. And perhaps there is a lesson in that. Most of us have family members, friends, or colleagues whose political views differ dramatically from our own. Some conversations are best avoided. Some disagreements never disappear. But mature relationships often survive because people recognize that the relationship itself matters more than winning every argument. That may be exactly what happened here. Politics remained politics. Diplomacy remained diplomacy. And common ground was found elsewhere. As for the government officials whose communications eventually became public, the political consequences of that situation are for voters to decide. Now let's return to the story we began with because you've earned the conclusion. Remember that image I asked you to keep in mind? A phone ringing unanswered across the Atlantic. This week revealed something even more striking. According to these reports, the phone may never ring at all. Because Harry no longer has the number, William appears to have made his decision. And those who know him describe him as a man who rarely changes course once his mind is made up. Meanwhile, the king, balancing family tensions alongside his own health concerns, finds himself relying on intermediaries and quiet diplomacy to preserve whatever connections remain. Future public events continue to spark speculation about possible reunions, a handshake, a conversation, a family photograph, a symbolic moment. Yet all of those hopes ultimately circle back to the same person. Catherine, the one individual many observers believe could influence William if she chose to. The woman who carries enormous expectations despite bearing none of the responsibility for creating the problem. And yet she owes nobody a solution. Not after everything that has happened. Not after the scrutiny. Not after the criticism. Not after becoming part of a story she never asked to join. She may choose to help. She may not. And either choice would be understandable. Because here is the reality. Harry went searching for freedom. And what he appears to have found, at least according to this interpretation of events, was distance. A quiet life in California. A world very different from the one he left behind. A future built on choices he freely made. And somewhere across the ocean, a brother who appears unwilling to pick up the phone. Whether that changes one day is a question only time can answer. But for now, the silence remains. If this discussion made you think, share it with someone who still believes a royal reconciliation is inevitable and see whether they feel the same way afterward. And if you enjoy independent royal commentary and analysis, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us for the next major royal event. Because if this week was dramatic, the next chapter may be even more revealing.